Hey, good afternoon to everyone who's just joining us for Essential Skills for Church Digital Marketing. My name is Ryan. I'll be one of the presenters on today's webinar. If you're just joining us, you are not muted by default. We forgot to check that box in the Zoom settings. So even people that know digital technology still make mistakes frequently. So feel free to mute yourself upon entry, and we'll be started in just a couple of minutes.
They're estimating the total as of last year, $3,367.19.
Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Essential Skills for Church Digital Marketing. We'll give everyone just a couple more minutes to get settled in this afternoon. A quick reminder to please mute yourself at the start of the call, and then introduce yourself if you would at the Zoom chat. If you feel free to share your name, perhaps a little bit about your ministry context, and if you have any questions or things you'd like to get out of today's session, we'd also love to see that as well. Thanks for being with us today.
No.
Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Michael, doing great. Thanks. How are you doing today?
I am great. Good to see everybody.
Yeah. We're so excited to get started with today's webinar, Essential Skills for Church Digital Marketing. Before we get started, one more invitation to please put yourself on mute. We've got quite a few folks joining in from around the country today. It's nice to see we have Florida, Las Vegas, Minnesota. Quite a range of backgrounds, of locations, of experiences that are dialing for today's webinar. So we are so excited to have you with us today. We're going to go ahead and kick things off because we've got a lot of ground to cover in this as we look to navigate this digital marketing landscape in the context of doing ministry. So we'll start with some introductions. We'll talk about what we have in store for the day, and then we'll just jump right into it. So I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Michael Chan, who's dialing in from Luther Seminary today. My name is Ryan Panzer. I am a writer and researcher on the topic of church and ministry and technology. I got that start. I got started in that world while I was working at Google and finishing up a seminary degree. And I found that there wasn't a lot of overlap between my job in the tech industry and what I was learning through my seminary coursework and my experiences in ministry. So I started talking to people, I started doing some research, and that led to the publication of a book, which we'll talk more about later. It's coming out in December, titled Grace and Gigabytes, Being Church in a Tech-Shaped Culture. All that to say, the topic of digital ministry, the topic of how we do ministry effectively in a digital age, is something that I'm very passionate about, something that I love discussing with church leaders, and I think something that is increasingly timely as we live in this new normal of distributed ministries, doing church almost entirely online. Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. It's good to see all of you. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic. You know, Ryan and I decided to do this webinar together, I think in part because during COVID times, both Ryan and I had been fielding certain kinds of questions, all of which had to do with sort of the digital environment and how do you do ministry that is on the one hand true to the gospel, right? True to what is at the core of our identity as ministers of the gospel, but that's also impactful. And that's also able to kind of cut through an increasingly dense cloud of just noise, right? I mean, I just think in one day, how many kind of marketing attempts that you might encounter, even just staying in your home, right, and just working from the computer, and there are an endless number of kind of marketing attempts that you'll bump up against. And so Ryan and I think, have been navigating some of those things alongside other people. And we just thought, you know what, there seems to be a need here for people to just have kind of a baseline understanding of what their digital options are, and maybe some ideas for how to cut a little bit through that noise. I currently teach Old Testament at Luther Seminary and have been here for, this is my second chapter here at Luther teaching. Prior to that, just several years ago, I co-founded and still own Heritage Media, which is a digital marketing, photography, videography business in Northern Arizona. We mainly focus on small businesses. I think the largest business we work with is actually a car dealership, a very local car dealership. But we work with a wide variety of small businesses and help them with their marketing needs. I host the Gospel Beautiful podcast, which you can check out right there if you like, and have some publications and whatnot. You'll hear from me a little bit more in just a few minutes. Ryan's going to take this first session, though. Once again, though, thank you so much, and Ryan, it's off to you.
Oh, thanks, Michael. So our agenda for today, we're going to start by talking about the idea of story-based church marketing, and I use that term story-based church marketing because we're not just trying to do marketing, but we're trying to use the tools of marketing in a way that helps us to position the gospel story in a way that it'll be heard in this digital ecosystem that we all inhabit. So that first part will take us up till about 2 o'clock. We'll take about a 10-minute break at 2 o'clock, give everyone a chance to take a few minutes to turn away from the Zoom screen for a little bit. If you're like me, you're spending a lot of time on Zoom these days. And then as we get into the second half, as we get into the second half of today's session, Dr. Chan will tell us a little bit about the theology of why digital marketing is a pastoral call and a responsibility of a Christian public leader in this digital age. At 3 o'clock, we're going to pivot into some project-based Q&A. So this will be an open forum. If you have questions about anything we cover during the webinar, we'll be happy to address those at 3 o'clock. But we can also at that time take any questions you might have about things you're working on right now in your context. Maybe you're thinking about getting your worship service online. Maybe you're looking at taking the next step from having a Facebook page to promoting posts on Facebook. Whatever questions you might have about doing ministry in the digital age and using digital marketing tactics, we'll have some conversation for about half an hour. and will be adjourned by 3:30 p.m. Central Time. So let's kick things off then with this conversation around story-based church marketing. And if you have any questions throughout today, I do have the chat pulled up on my other monitor. So I'll pause from time to time to take any questions you might have. Feel free to just post those and I will respond to those intermittently throughout the presentation today. Now, I want to start by kind of giving you a lay of the landscape of what we talk about when we talk about digital marketing and the complex digital ecosystem in which we inhabit. There are many different tools for church leaders to use and put towards the purposes of sharing the gospel in a digital environment. Some of those tools are a little bit more text-based. They're easier to post to, but they require special permissions. Oftentimes they're restricted to staff and pastors. Examples of that might be your church website. Similarly, there are examples of tools that involve rich media, things like videos, photography, sharing sight, sound, and images from your community. And sometimes those tools can be opened up throughout your community. You can use tools like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Zoom, Vimeo, and Facebook Live to expand the media formats that you're using and tell a richer story. Now, I share this not to alarm anybody or to overwhelm anybody with the number of tools that are a part of this landscape. And there are indeed many more that aren't even listed on the slide. But I share this with you to try to anchor our conversation in the idea that we're seeking as church leaders to put together the ability to tell the Christian story, which is something we've been doing for 2,000 years, in a way that fits with some of the tools on this screen. And that's what you're going to be hearing from me about this afternoon, is how we juxtapose and combine these two things together, two things that can seem disparate at times, but I think you'll find have a surprising amount of overlap. So to start, I think it's helpful to think about this conversation in terms of marketing skills and marketing tactics. We called the webinar today Essential Skills for Church Digital Marketing, and not Essential Tactics for digital marketing. And that was pretty intentional, because what we talk about when we're thinking about Christian public leadership is the idea of using our skills as pastoral leaders and then translating them into the tactics. The tactics that you see on this screen never come first. Instead, what comes first is the ability to tell a story, to sequence a story so that it resonates within specific moments, and then to share that work through various pieces of storytelling. All the marketing tactics allow us to do are to create content, to share content, and measure content. So everything we talk about within the context, within the frame of digital ministry, starts with this ability to tell a really good story. But specifically in Christian contexts, we have to get a little bit more precise than that. It's not just the ability to tell a story that counts, but it's the ability to do so with creativity. It's the ability to tell that story in a way that's collaborative. And it's an ability to tell that story with a commitment to innovation, to trying new things, to pushing yourself as a church leader a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and perhaps reaching for new ways of telling the gospel story that might have been completely unfamiliar to your context even a few weeks ago. So maybe some of those things might be ads, blogs, videos, podcasts, social media or web development or newsletters. Again, each one of these that you see on the right side is a tactic. And what my argument is that you can learn the tactics fairly quickly. What matters is that we start with an intentional focus on marketing skills. And to get a little bit more precise, in terms of the marketing skills that you'll need as a church leader, it's the ability to tell God's story within the context of your community. It's the ability to create connections between what God is doing in your community, even in this time when we're all distributed in our environments, and to invite others to share in that work of telling God's story. And when we talk about church marketing skills, we also talk about testing new tactics constantly, because the Holy Spirit, like the internet in some ways, is always changing, ever moving, and constantly dynamic. Church marketing tactics, incidentally, are really no different. Things like advertising, blogs, videos, podcasts, social media, websites, and newsletters work whether you're a small business, a nonprofit, or a church. So it's our job as church leaders to take the things that you see on this slide, things like display ads, landing pages, and word of mouth recommendations, and to put them in language that fits the proclamation of the gospel story. This, by the way, is a tool that we're going to draw from throughout today's webinar. It's called a digital marketing funnel. And some of you might be familiar with tools or with visualizations like this. What they help to visualize is a customer's journey. And if you think about the top of the funnel, you can think of lots of people that may or may not be familiar or aware of a brand or a business. So the first thing businesses or organizations try to do is to cast a really wide net to generate awareness about what they're all about. And what businesses then try to do is they try to narrow that net to reduce the number of people in this funnel as they move through journeys of consideration, conversion, where where somebody moves from being a prospect to being a customer, loyalty, where somebody becomes a raving fan of a brand or a business, and advocacy, which is the point where somebody becomes not just a fan of a brand or a business, but somebody who's willing to tell that story on behalf of the brand or the business. Some of you might see the football player in the background of my home office / football viewing fan cave. I consider myself a raving fan of the Wisconsin Badger football team, and I'm constantly telling the story of Wisconsin Badger football to whoever will listen. I am what businesses would consider to be at the very bottom of this marketing funnel, this digital marketing funnel. And what we're going to talk about today is not just this digital marketing funnel, but how this digital marketing funnel translates into the work of being a Christian public leader. So it's not our job to move people through a buying process. It's not our job to funnel people. It's not our job to get somebody to move from a prospect to a customer. Our work is a little bit different in the church. Our work starts with helping people to be aware of what God is up to in our community, to give them an invitation to attend, to move that attendance into engagement, to move engagement into leadership, and then to move leadership into evangelism or word of mouth invitations and recommendations. It's the same type of sequencing you would see with any other organization, but the marketing skills that matter are a little bit different for us as church leaders. So as we spend our time together this afternoon, we're going to go into each of these 5 categories: awareness, attendance, engagement, leadership, and evangelism, talking about what you as a Christian public leader need to know, talk about what tools you can use to engage each of these points of the church digital marketing funnel, and to give you some resources for further learning and further exploration. I'm going to pause there. If once again, if there's any questions, feel free to post them to the Zoom chat. I'll be happy to answer those. We're going to transition a little bit into a time of talking about some specific marketing tactics juxtaposed against some of these church digital marketing skills we've just introduced here. And I realize there will be questions about all of these. Feel free to post those as we go. We want to make this session as collaborative as possible.
Hey, Ryan, let me just interject really quickly. Just as a reminder to everyone, this is being recorded right now. I'm sure you all saw the notification at the beginning, but the recording will be available to all of you afterwards. So if your hands are starting to hurt from typing, don't worry.
We'll also send out the slides too. So let's start then at the top of that funnel with awareness. Telling your church's story, telling God's story to those who have never heard of you, to those who may not know what God is up to within their life. That's where each of us as church leaders ought to start. And what's perhaps trickiest about this topic of awareness is it's maybe the area that as church leaders, we know the least about. We're really comfortable with things like calendars and newsletters that we'll talk about in the attendance phase. But when it comes to awareness, this, in my opinion, is perhaps the leading growth edge for most Christian public leaders with regard to their church digital marketing skills. As we think about awareness then, and how you can use digital marketing to generate awareness of what God is up to within your context, there are some key considerations. A few goals that you'll want to have in mind as a church leader include casting a compelling vision of how God is at work within your community. And I think that's one of the challenges of being a church leader. So often we get bogged down into the scheduling and the details of our events. We want people to know when and where and how to find us. And certainly all of that is important, but that doesn't come first. What precedes that is casting this vision and sharing that story of what God is up to with humility, with empathy, and with a commitment to listening to the voices and perspectives around us in the community. Of course, each of these should be somewhat familiar to us as church leaders. And I think that's good news, because what I'm trying to share through this webinar today is that the skills of pastoral ministry already give you a first step into doing effective digital marketing. We can learn the tactics if we have the pastoral mindset, which all of us on this call are probably experts in already. When we think about awareness, we're thinking about the very top of that funnel. And when we talk about people that are at that top of the funnel, looking to be engaged at the level of awareness, we're looking at those who are perhaps ambivalent to participation with a church. They're not hostile towards it, they're not opposed to it, but they maybe don't see the value add within their lives. Similarly, when we look at that top of the funnel, there's a layer of what I've heard referred to as ambient anxiety. Anxiety about the state of the world, especially now. Anxiety about the future and what that future holds. Anxiety about security in one's life, with one's job, with one's ability to provide for one's family. And we also have an audience that's perhaps burnt out on Zoom, burnt out on digital connection. Earlier this week, I read about a condition called Zoom apnea, where those on Zoom calls actually breathe less than is considered to be healthy for normal human respiration. When we're in digital environments constantly, it's actually fatiguing. And that's something we ought to be aware of when we think about this broader conversation of awareness, is that everyone's just a little bit burnt out right now on connecting over a computer screen. As an aside, I really appreciate the 26 of you making time today to be on yet another Zoom call. I'm sure your calendar is just chock full of them right now. So some questions then that you as a church leader might ask yourself as we consider this phase of awareness. How exactly is God at work within our community, especially during COVID-19? Why does that matter to those who are ambivalent towards church or religious affiliation? And how does your faith community provide some sense of rest and Sabbath to a weary community, a community that's anxious, a community that's a little bit burnt out? When you start by thinking about these questions, the tactics become a little bit easier, and it becomes a bit easier to understand what tactics you ought to engage as a church leader. So translating these into the specific tactics that we can use those who are at the top of the funnel to become aware of our ministry. There are effectively 3 different levers that I would pull as somebody who has worked in digital marketing and worked in the church. The first lever is our website. And what we want to do with this is move our websites from places that communicate information to places that tell stories that answer many of the questions, that address many of the needs you saw on the previous slides. And similarly, we want to structure those stories in a way that our website will show up on Google's desktop and mobile search applications when people are looking for us. And another tactic for awareness that I want to mention briefly today is the idea of paid promotions on Facebook and the Google search engine specifically. Both of those, though they do have costs, they are advertising tools, can be effective ways to draw people from the community and context surrounding your church into deeper engagement with your ministry. So just to name a few tactics you might look at as we think about this conversation around awareness, 3 tools I have listed here that are really effective ways to increase the quality of your church website. Clover Sites is an app that's built just for church leaders to design compelling church websites. And Wix and Squarespace are leading templates that create mobile optimized, search engine optimized websites that meet the design aesthetic that most web users are looking for these days. If you signed up for today's workshop online ahead of time, you did so on a Wix website. I believe Dr. Chan also uses Squarespace for some of his projects and showcase some of his photography work.
Hey, Ryan, can I just say one thing quickly about websites?
Yeah.
The tools these days for websites, we mentioned Wix and Squarespace and Clover Sites here, they are such that if you can get onto Zoom, you can most likely build your own website and it will look great. Because there are so many easy drag and drop upload templates that are available now through some of the services that we just mentioned, that there are web design services that will literally charge you thousands of dollars to build a website. That is unnecessary, utterly. And if you build it by yourself, you don't have to wait for updates to happen. You can do it all on your own. And if you need a little bit of help, hit somebody up in the youth group and they will probably be able to get you beyond that one hurdle that's bothering you. Sorry, Ryan, to interrupt you.
No, that's really helpful context, because I think when we talk about websites, the first reaction many church leaders have is one of apprehension, that I don't have the skills to design an effective website. And I think what Dr. Chan alluded to there is you absolutely have the skills you need. You have the tools you need. What each of these 3 platforms allows you to do is to connect your pastoral skills with the best technology that the web has to offer. But it's not enough to just build a website these days. It's also important to make sure that that website can be found and that you'll show up on that web, and that you'll show up on places like the Google search engine. So two tools that I have listed here will help you to do just that. The first tool, which I won't get into much of a demonstration of today, is Google Webmaster Tools. And if your church website hasn't already registered for Webmaster Tools, please do so. Effectively, Webmaster Tools allows you to see where your ministry, where your website shows up on certain searches that are important to your ministry. If you want to know where your ministry shows up on Google searches like churches near me or Lutheran congregations in my neighborhood, Google Webmaster Tools will tell you just that. And it'll also tell you if there's problems with your website. Sometimes there's really small technical glitches that can happen on a website that prevent a website from being found on Google. Google Webmaster Tools solves that problem for you, and it's a completely free application that anyone who has a website should be using. But the tool that I did want to take some time to show you as part of this segment is the Google Mobile Friendly Test. Now, the Google Mobile Friendly Test will scan any site on the web, and it'll evaluate the way that that website shows up on mobile phones. This is an important consideration in a day and age where 60% of all traffic on the web is coming from a smartphone. Not only that, but about 3/4 of all web users won't return to a website if they have a poor experience on a mobile site. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter the URL of, I'm gonna take, well, what the heck, I'll take my website and we'll test the URL. I haven't done my website on this test yet, so it'll be interesting to see how it shows up. What this mobile-friendly site will do, though, is it'll give me a number of recommendations of things that I can fix to make my website a little bit more mobile-friendly. And here, it's telling me that my page is mobile-friendly. I meet the criteria. I'm going to show up on Google. That's good news. It also tells me that there are some issues that can be resolved. I won't go into these in much greater detail, other than to tell you that these can be fixed by most folks that know how to do IT. So the Google Mobile Friendly test doesn't require an account or anything like that. It will show you if your website is mobile friendly in a day where being mobile friendly is a must, and it'll give you some insights that you can use to make your website more mobile compatible. One other tool that's especially important for awareness is the Google My Business app. Now, Google My Business takes listings about your ministry, about your church, and it places them atop the Google search results. So here's an example of what information shows up from my church in Madison, Wisconsin, Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. Google My Business has the hours of operation, has the phone number. It also has reviews, which are good reviews, and we want to be encouraging our community to write positive reviews about the experience they have with our congregation. All of this information can be edited and can be adjusted after a business has gone through a process of verifying their listing on Google My Business. So I encourage all of you to check to confirm that your ministry has verified their listing on Google My Business. It's a fairly straightforward process. If you haven't verified your listing, you fill out a form on google.com/business. They'll send you a postcard with a PIN number, and you'll input that PIN number on that website just to verify you own that website and you work for that location. But this is a super easy and free tool to use to make sure that when we're talking about awareness, people are aware of the most accurate information about our ministry. Two other tools that I want to mention as it pertains to awareness are ads on Facebook and ads on Google. And in my experience, church leaders are sometimes hesitant to try online ads. Perhaps they've seen online ads that follow them around the web, and it can be, a little strange. Or perhaps they're just not sure where to get started, and they think there's potential. They want to try it. I started my career working in online advertising and eventually moved into digital marketing at Google. And I can tell you countless stories of nonprofits, of ministry-oriented organizations that had small degrees of success, even great degrees of success, using Google's advertising platform. When it comes to using Facebook, what you can do is target certain audience characteristics. So for example, if you want to target folks in Madison, Wisconsin, who post about religious content, or post to their newsfeed about religion and spirituality, you could create a promoted listing that shows up to those who are within 3 miles of your church building. Similarly with Google Ads, if you want to show up within 2 miles of your church building, anytime somebody searches for the phrase church near me or Methodist congregation near me, Google Ads will allow you to do that. If you need help with Facebook advertising or Google advertising, there are countless web resources that explain how to do this in very simple terms. And there's a whole network of partner advertising agencies that can help you to get started on either platform. I find that churches spend a lot of money on marketing on things like sometimes billboards or signage or external signage, particularly outside of their building. Google and Facebook advertising is the new signage investment of the digital age. And when you're placing ads either on Facebook or on Google, basically what you're doing is you're making a great, compelling church sign that everyone will see.
Hey, Ryan, if you don't mind me, I just interject here for a moment.
Of course, yeah.
I really appreciate especially the opportunities to learn from both Facebook advertising and Google Ads, because if you set up, say, an ad campaign on Facebook and Instagram, as that ad campaign goes out, both platforms will provide you with kind of human behavioral information. So did people share it? Did they click on the link that you provided? What did they actually do when they saw the ad itself? And from my perspective, there is a great value, of course, on the exposure side, right? You're getting people to learn about your church. But more valuable is actually the learning content you can gain from interpreting those data. For instance, you can learn a lot about what is going to get a person's attention visually and in terms of text. What kinds of questions cause people to be interested in something? And the lessons you learn from those kinds of things spill over into sermon writing. They spill over into how you market VBS or something like that. There is so much to learn about being a great communicator just by studying the results of your ads. I'll give you just one example. If you were to dedicate even $75 a month to running any number of Facebook ad campaigns, maybe at $10 increments, you would learn a great deal each month that would improve yourself as a teacher, as a communicator, as a marketer by studying the data from those ads. So, okay, sorry, Ryan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that context, Dr. Chan. I think that's actually a realistic budget starting point too. You know, just a few dozen dollars a month. And I'm not a commissioned sales rep for Google or Facebook by any means, but it can be quite affordable. You pay on a per click basis, so only when somebody visits your website or visits your church Facebook page do you actually pay for that advertising. I did want to highlight two things about Google before we move on to our next topic. What you'll see here is a search query for Orlando, Florida churches. I know we've got a couple of folks from Florida on the call today. And you have 3 churches at the top of this page that have placed ads on Google for the searches, for a search on somebody in Orlando looking for churches. And those ads appear at the very top of the page ahead of any of these what are referred to as organic search results. So a paid listing on Google is an effective way to get yourself pretty much immediately to the top of the Google search results. The other thing I wanted to highlight here was the Google My Business listings. So again, on the same query for Orlando, Florida churches, we have several churches whose Google My Business page comes up. These are churches that have verified, that have claimed their Google My Business listing. And these aren't paid, these are organic. So any free, and any click on this listing is free. And when I pull this up, it gives me actually a couple of nice things. It tells me how I can get in contact with this ministry. It shows the Google reviews associated with First Baptist, and even gives me a little calendar of some of the events happening at First Baptist Orlando. A couple of pictures of their nice Christmas programming too. Lois posted a question, which I want to just read here, and Dr. Chan, feel free to share your thoughts as well. Lois asked, is Facebook still changing its boost/ad criteria, percentage text in the main image, number of characters in the title frequently? They were driving me crazy a few years ago. So just to zoom out a little bit, Lois mentioned that when you have an ad on Facebook, what you'll include in that ad is an image, some text to describe that image, a title that goes along with that image. So you combine text and image to put an ad onto Facebook. And Lois, I don't know specifically about how Facebook has changed its criteria recently, but I can tell you that Facebook and Google both regularly experiment with different ad formats and will try different things. So if that was driving you crazy a few years ago, I would encourage you to try it again. It's very likely that Facebook found that experience was similar for other users, and they have since changed a few things around. My phone is just going crazy over here because every time I say Google, my phone thinks I'm talking to it and looking for information on the Google search engine. I do just want to address 2 quick points on measurement, and we're not going to have a specific deep dive into anything related to measurement today, but how do you know if you're doing awareness right? You know, how will you see that? And you'll see that in 2 different ways, which can be measured on any platform that websites are built on. And those metrics are site visits. Is our website trending upward, downward, or is it stagnating? If as church leaders we're building awareness, our site traffic should simply be trending up. And then a percentage of new site visitors is another interesting metric to keep an eye on, because if we're doing awareness building well, the percentage of visitors to our website should be increasingly from those who haven't been to our website before. We should have a high percentage of new site visitors. So both of those metrics can be measured on platforms like Wix and Squarespace. Google Analytics is the software that I use to do all of my web measurement. It's a totally free tool. But everything you're going to hear about today can be measured. That's one of the great advantages of using these tactics. Last thing I want to mention about awareness, kind of the top of the funnel for church marketing, is that there are a number of resources to help you learn more. I recommend following these 4 blogs to really learn more about the digital advertising and website development space. Those blogs are Search Engine Land, PPC Hero, the WordStream blog, and the HubSpot blog. What I do is I just follow each of these on Twitter. So when I'm looking at Twitter, I can see their most recent posts. And I kind of use my 5 minutes on Twitter every day as some professional development time to read through the latest and greatest with this topic. There's also a number of books that have been written. Many of them are short, very easy reads. AdWords for Dummies is a favorite of mine, or really any book in that For Dummies series. I find that they're written right at my level. And then The Ultimate Guide to Facebook Advertising is an excellent resource for those looking to try advertising on Facebook. Just one more note on resources for learning more about these things. Blogs and websites are often going to be more current resources than books are. You think about a book, it has about a 12-month development cycle, whereas a blog development happens over the course of, say, 1 week. So occasionally the content that you see on a recent blog post is going to be the most up-to-date, most cutting-edge content. Dr. Chan, you posted adespresso.com. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, it's just another resource like what you posted. Adespresso does kind of mini courses that I find are really helpful, especially if you're just wading into these waters. So just another recommendation.
Thanks for that. So as we do these things, as we generate this awareness, as we tell our story of what God is up to those who are ambivalent towards our community, but not yet and not yet a part of it, we should start to see more people moving down that funnel and moving from awareness into attendance, or the idea of building community in a distributed virtual first world. Before I go there, are there any questions about anything we talked about with regard to awareness? Any of the key considerations, any of the questions, any of the tactics or resources? We'll just pause. If anyone has a question, feel free to throw it in the Zoom chat. Okay, feel free to post any questions at any time. Again, we want to make sure that, oh, here we go. Question, what are your thoughts about Weebly as a web platform? Yeah, that question is from, I think, Joel Mel. Yeah, Weebly is a platform similar to Wix or Squarespace. I think you would find it's quite compatible in terms of features, quite comparable. I don't have a strong opinion on it as far as it compares to Wix and Squarespace. Wix and Squarespace are a little more widely used, and Clover Sites is a little bit more widely used within the church space specifically. One of the things I do like about Weebly is its mobile website formats are quite easy to design and render really nicely on a smartphone. And a question from Ingrid. If your website is not one of your preferred options, should you switch to Wix and Squarespace? Yeah, so just in terms of some context about how church websites used to be developed, probably about 15 years ago, a church would say, we need a website. They would hire a website developer, and that developer would build a website from scratch. And that was great because it was how websites were built 15 years ago. The problem with that approach is that those websites become difficult to maintain, hard to update, and hard to keep the aesthetic looking modern and contemporary and aesthetically pleasing. If you haven't had a website update in the last 3 to 5 years, and you're not sure even how to update your website, then yes, I would very much recommend looking into tools like Wix and Squarespace, because they'll give you that modern aesthetic and because they'll give you the ability to keep your website current. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, that's a great point, and thanks for that question, Ingrid. The other thing to note is, because they're so easy to use, you could literally burn your website down one evening and have a new one standing in the morning, and not pay anything additional. So if you and your committee say this is starting to look like 2013, it needs to look like 2020, you'd say, okay, that's fine. I'm going to spend 3 hours on it tonight. And you can take down the old one and have the new one reinstalled within that period of time, no problem at all, and with no additional fees paid to the service provider.
And if your website is looking 2013, you're probably doing pretty well within the overall landscape of church websites. There are really some clunkers out there. Okay, so let's move then into talking about attendance, or how we move somebody from the top of our funnel where we're thinking about awareness, a little bit lower down the path towards evangelism and leadership, and some of the ways we can do that through using social media in particular. Just like awareness, there are some key considerations that we want to think of as it pertains to attendance. As a church leader, when we talk about attendance and when we talk about promoting attendance online, we want to look at using the web in such a way that it is crystal clear about points of access to the ministry, about pathways to involvement. What we want to make it super easy to do is to connect to your ministry in person for when our buildings open back up after this is all over, or online. In as few clicks as possible, how can someone find the information about where things are happening, when things are happening, and how they can access them? Now, when we talk about the audience that's thinking about attending, that's thinking about getting involved and being with us in kind of a synchronous environment, either for worship or some kind of an event, we have an audience that's a little impatient with low quality content around the web, an audience that is unwilling to navigate complexity, and that ties into some of that digital burnout I mentioned earlier. And they're willing to switch what I refer to here as brands or products based on ease of use, but that certainly translates to the world of church as well. So as a church leader, I think it's helpful to ask these things when you're thinking about digital marketing and promoting attendance. What are we up to? What kinds of things is our ministry doing that people can join us for? How can we prioritize simplicity so that we communicate those things as easily as possible? When I think about today and all these churches doing worship over Zoom or Facebook Live or YouTube, simplicity is accessing the worship service with one click in a way that doesn't require somebody to download any additional software. That's the mindset that we should look at with all of our communications. We want to make this easy for people. And then how do we create parity between the online and the offline experience? Is there a way that when our buildings reopen, everything we do as a church can have an online expression, so that as a church we simultaneously live in the offline and the online space? If we do that, if and when we do that, how do we make that happen? How do we share the online points of access to those that are unable to join us in the building? So then when it comes down to actually having the rubber hit the road on attendance, there are a few things to consider. Using social media as an invitation to involvement is the starting point. Having a calendar that provides a transparent and accessible snapshot of life in the ministry, and then using newsletters to tell stories that facilitate involvement. This is the threefold approach that I recommend with digital marketing. Social media as an invitation, calendars to provide the details, and newsletters to tell stories. Lois posted a question: would you consider another aspect of simplicity to be language and vocabulary of the communications? Yeah, Lois, 100%. When we talk about simplicity, we're not just talking about technical specifications or how to format a hyperlink, but does our language speak the vernacular of the community in which we find ourselves? Are we communicating the gospel message using words that will be understood within our church, or within our neighborhood beyond our church? So you use the word churchy. Having some kind of a process for filtering out the churchy speak or the theological jargon, perhaps, so it can be simply heard beyond our walls. That's a great question. What I have here is a grid of some of the different social media platforms that ministries or any organizations have access to. And I've classified them based on necessary platforms and emerging platforms. And then on the x-axis, you'll see a dimension of experimental ranging to familiar. And to start in the upper right-hand quadrant, Facebook is the familiar, necessary social media platform. It's by far the most used social media platform in the world. Even in this day when young people say they're not using it, you're going to reach more people on Facebook than any other tool. It is still necessary for churches to be on Facebook. On the experimental side of things is Instagram. Instagram is what I would consider an essential social media site because of the fact that so many young people use Instagram as their exclusive social media platform. Especially in my generation and younger, users are turning to Instagram and turning away from Facebook. Instagram is so popular and it's such a compelling storytelling tool that I would be remiss to not have one for any ministry that I was involved with. So don't be like the church leaders that sat at the Synod Assembly in 2008 in Appleton, Wisconsin. And when the bishop asked, how many of you have created a Facebook page for your ministry? And almost no hands went up because none had. Be on the leading edge of this and get an Instagram page for your ministry. It will pay dividends in the long run. Julie Kelly posted Canva, which is a free resource for any 501c3s. Canva is a graphic design tool that integrates seamlessly with Instagram. I would highly recommend trying that if you're gonna be using Instagram.
Hey, Ryan, let me say one more thing about Canva. So Canva is a graphic design site, but it is for Facebook, emails, Instagram ads, basically anything that involves digital posting. You will find templates for on Canva, and it just makes the whole like graphic design thing unintimidating. It has a super intuitive search engine. You can sort of plug and play different parts. You can add your own picture, put different frames on it, add text. There are so many options with Canva, and even if you have to pay for it, it's really cheap, like well under 20 bucks, I think.
And Kayla commented, love Canva, uses it for everything at church. That's great to hear. I'm a frequent user of Canva myself. Now, below this line, you have some social networks that I think are a little more experimental, or at least emerging. They don't have the user base, and they have fewer ministries that are using these consistently. With these more experimental and emerging social media platforms, churches usually tend to be cautious in trying them out. A lot of church leaders are still wary about using Facebook, using Twitter, or TikTok is used by hardly any churches, even though it's been rapidly adopted, especially among younger generations. My advice to all church leaders is to use the necessary social media platforms and then to consistently be trying one emerging platform to see if it works for your ministry. You know, if you post to Twitter and nobody's looking at your tweets and you've done it for 6 months and you don't have much of a community there, try Snapchat to start messages within your church community. If Snapchat doesn't feel quite right, see if perhaps posting to Pinterest might generate some kind of a community. There are many different social networks beyond what's listed on this slide. The key to being an effective user of social media is to do the necessary platforms well, as you're always trying to find that next big thing. A couple of other tactics that I would point out for attendance. It's really important to have a church calendar that's easily accessible, where it's easy to sign up for events or to see what events are coming up. So I posted a couple of resources here, Subsplash and Breeze Church Management Software. Both of these tools include resources that can help you to take your calendar, put it online, and export it and share it through things like mobile apps, websites, and newsletters. I want to pause there for a question from Patrick, and this is a great question. Should one use the same creative message on Facebook and on Instagram? If not, how should we differentiate? So in terms of the medium that you have access to, Instagram only gives you access to image or video. It doesn't allow you to have longer text-based posts. Nor does Instagram allow you to easily link to a site that's off of Instagram. So that's going to lead to some natural differences in terms of the creative messages. What I recommend for churches is to move more of the content that's focused on promoting events, on describing things that are happening in the newsletter and putting those over on Facebook. And then anything visual, recordings of your choir singing a virtual song where you have like 9 different voices on the screen together, or snapshots of your Christmas programming. Those are things that work particularly well on Instagram. Ultimately, though, I encourage church leaders not to fret too much about what goes on Facebook versus what goes on Instagram. When in doubt, post to both places if you can. The benefit of doing that is that you're going to attract different generations and different cohorts based on each of those social networks.
And just from an efficiency perspective, keep in mind that you can cross-post in-app from Instagram to Facebook, not from Facebook to Instagram. So if you go, for instance, to your Instagram app, you'll see you can link your Facebook account to it, and you will see an option to, when you do a post, to either share it to your Facebook or to not do it. So just keep in mind that you can only do, it's only a one-way street, Instagram to Facebook, not Facebook to Instagram.
Oops, let me go back a slide here. A couple of other tactics for thinking about this conversation about attendance. One tool that I encourage people to think about using is MailChimp. It's an effective way to build a church newsletter. And MailChimp will give you access to thousands of email marketing templates that are sleek, that are minimalist, that are super compelling, and it'll make you look like an email marketing genius with only just a few minutes of time spent formatting based on MailChimp's design templates. MailChimp also makes it really easy to manage your contacts. So if you have not even a database, because that sounds overly complicated, if you have a list of email addresses that belong to your church, you can store those within MailChimp to make it super easy to send out messages and then to segment messages based on different audiences. If you listen to any podcasts, you've probably heard advertising from MailChimp. They were the platform that got famous from advertising off of the Serial podcast when that came out. It's a great platform. I've seen it used in big companies, small churches, and everything in between. So when we think about attendance then, I encourage church leaders to think about two different things with this. First, how many views are we getting on the key pages of our website? When we use things like social media, when we use things like newsletters, we're probably not driving our traffic to our website homepage. We're likely driving traffic to specific pages that have information about worship, to specific pages that have information about giving or particular events, maybe a calendar page. Any web analytics platform like Google Analytics will tell you how many people looked at particular pages. And I encourage people to keep track of the number of visits going to pages like a calendar page, like a giving page, like an events page or worship page. And then if you want to get really advanced with this, thinking about what the relationship is between the number of visits you have to your website and the number of attendees you have at worship. This is something you might want to wait until we're all back in the building to measure, because right now everything is so unpredictable. But many church leaders that were savvy digital marketers prior to COVID had almost an algorithm figured out where they could say for every 5 visits we got to our website, we drove 1 visit or 1 attendee to worship on Sunday morning. And that can help with planning your digital marketing efforts and putting your resources behind what generates the most return on your investment. Ben posted a question on metrics. For synod metrics, congregational metrics, churchwide, how do we measure attendance in 2020? Yeah, Ben, there are a lot of people wondering this same question. When you look at your worship attendance, it's captured a little bit differently on each platform. So it depends what you're using for worship right now. Facebook, for example, will always show you the number of views on a particular video, as will YouTube. So many church leaders are just tabulating those on a weekly basis and putting those into a spreadsheet, and then combining those with the attendance they had up until early March. 1 minute Facebook views plus YouTube views. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't speak for your synod and what they're looking for, or even how they're going to define this. I think individual synods, the churchwide office, are going to have to sit down and think very carefully about how they're measuring these things. But if you put a 60-minute worship service on YouTube and somebody takes a minute to watch that church service, would you count it? I guess the answer to that is, would you count somebody that sat in the pews for church for 3 minutes and heard some of the sermon that walked in off of the street? Most churches would probably count that. And I would be inclined to count that as well, though that'll ultimately be up to church administrators to have the final say on. A couple of resources for learning more about attendance, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. 2 blogs I follow are Social Media Today, has kind of the latest and greatest features of all things related to social media. There's also a blog called Convince and Convert, which is a little bit more oriented towards helping folks develop compelling content on their social media. And finally, I love this book. I talk about it all the time. The book Click to Save Reboot by Keith Anderson and Elizabeth Drescher is a must-have resource on the tactics of using social media, of doing some of these things, of having a newsletter to drive attendance at your church. I also recommend using something like an RSS reader app. If you don't know what that is, that's totally fine. Look up an app called Feedly. It allows you to say what topics you're interested in. I have what's called a board on Feedly, and it shows me all of the latest blog posts on topics related to digital marketing, so I can keep tabs on all of these changes in a fast-moving world. So let's pause there. It's 2:03 by my watch. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll return at 2:13.
See you all soon. Hey, Ryan, just for a second here, do you feel like you need a few more minutes to cover anything else?
Yeah, maybe like 5-10 minutes.
Totally fine. That's
right.
fine. It's like I think I said mine's probably going to be 35 minutes, and then I'll do questions too.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
So hey everyone, welcome back. We'll get started in about 60 seconds. All right, everyone, welcome back. We'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick recap on the first part of today's webinar. What we're talking about is digital marketing in the world of Christian public leadership. And my argument with all of this is that we start with an awareness of how to tell God's story, and that awareness comes from the skills we have as church leaders, as pastoral individuals, and we combine those skills with some of the tactics of digital marketing, which we've been discussing for about the last 40 minutes or so. I just have a few more thoughts on some of these tactics of digital marketing, and then we're going to go back to Dr. Chan, who's going to kind of connect the dots for us theologically about why these things are so important to the roles and responsibilities of church leadership. Once again, thank you for all the questions today. There's been a lot of good discussion in the chat. We have a good thread going right there now about using Facebook premieres and Facebook watch parties. Please keep the conversation coming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about content for the rest of my segment of this webinar. And I'm specifically going to discuss content in the frame of how we can create compelling content as a church, and then how we can enlist our church community to create content collaboratively. So it isn't just the pastor's voice that gets shared through digital content, but it's the voice of the entire Christian community. So to start with, we're going to talk about engagement, which is one step lower on the funnel. Once we've got somebody attending our church, we've made them aware through our website, through our ads, through our mobile site. We've gotten them to connect to our ministry through our social media presence and through our calendars. Now we want to get them engaged or kind of keep them coming back. And the way we do that is by producing stories through blogs, videos, and podcasts. Now, in this segment, some of the considerations that you might want to think about is the idea that sight, sound, and image, when paired together, are the best way to help your story stand out in an ecosystem that's kind of overrun with digital messaging. There's so much text-based content on social media and in emails. Simply adding an image or ideally adding video is a great way to get your message seen and heard in a way that text alone won't allow you to do. Polish and perfection matter less than clarity and consistency. Your community wants to hear from you. They want to hear from their church, and they want to hear from their church regularly. They're not looking for a Steven Spielberg production. And then lastly, don't try everything when it comes to some of these tactics of engagement. Try a few things, see what works, and keep experimenting. when I think about engagement and when I think about the world of digital content, I think about an audience that's staring at a full refrigerator with nothing to eat. I know many of us have Netflix accounts, and if you're like me, you've probably had the experience of sitting on your couch, faced with tens of thousands of choices of things to watch, and spending an hour scrolling through those options, deciding there's nothing good on, and just giving up on the endeavor. What that means for us as content creators is it's important to be consistent so people can expect us to be creating content. They can expect to see that content as part of the cadence of their participation in the church. And attention spans are short. So when we talk about this content, we're talking about creating snackable, bite-sized content, no more than perhaps 3 to 5 minutes in length. And I say that attention spans are short until they aren't, because there's always a space for long-form conversations in the form of a podcast, which is something Dr. Chan could share a little bit more about. When we talk about engagement and creating engagement through digital content, some of the questions that matter is that I encourage you as a church leader to think about: what are the stories that you want your church telling? What are the stories that resonate within this present moment we're in? And how can we make sure we're telling those stories to meet the cultural moment that we find ourselves in? Then, how can we fit those stories into micro content that aligns to the lifestyle of our community? I think 30 seconds to 3 minutes, 5 minutes tops is probably the duration of digital content that we should be looking for in this work from home environment that many of us find ourselves in. But a 12-minute podcast is also a really compelling value add, especially in a community like Madison, Wisconsin, where the average commute is about 12 minutes. So that's what I mean by aligning this to the lifestyle of the community, finding a way to make the digital content we create just short enough so that it integrates within the rhythm of life. And also, what storytelling expertise exists within our community? It's important for you as church leaders to have an inventory of the gifts that can help tell these stories collaboratively. Ultimately, we don't just want to be telling these stories ourselves. We want to be enlisting many others to tell these stories together. So the tactics for engagement that are here, we're talking about short blogs, 300 words at most, that support the themes of preaching and worship. I highly encourage everyone to blog and blog regularly, to blog weekly and perhaps even daily as a church. It's a great way to boost your listings in search results, but it more importantly reinforces the themes of Christian living that you're introducing on Sunday mornings. Videos. What's interesting about video is that live video offers considerable forgiveness. And yet, when we think of video, what we so often think about are recorded, edited, and polished clips. I would encourage you to think about video as a tool for sharing a live word with your community. Using tools like Instagram and Facebook Live, go live, share a few thoughts, share a few musings, share some reflections on the world around you and how it intersects with the themes of preaching and worship for the week. People will watch a live recording, they'll watch a piece of live video, and they'll like it and enjoy it and watch it at a much higher rate than they'll watch anything that's recorded. And finally, I have podcasts listed here, conversations about God moments. An effective format that I found for podcasts in a congregation is the idea of having a story where somebody in your community shares some perspectives that they've had, some experiences that they've had, where a pastor or somebody who is theologically trained shares some reflection on how that story fits into God's story, and then uses that podcast to model a life of prayer. So joining those three things together, you can create a podcast that's 12 to 15 minutes in length and probably resonates quite nicely within your community. Just a couple of the tools that I recommend. In terms of blogging, the two most popular platforms on the web are Google's Blogger platform, as well as WordPress. But if you're using something like Wix and Squarespace, both of those tools have built-in blogs that are super high quality, aesthetically pleasing, and easy to manage. Facebook Live and Instagram Live are compelling ways to share yourself giving a quick reflection. One of the pastors at the church I attended in Madison has used Instagram Live to do some prayer and Bible study every morning at 10 a.m. since the pandemic started. And the community just finds that it's a nice centering point to watch these really short videos and to just kind of get that brief glimpse of Sabbath rest at a time when the rest of the world has really become beholden to a lot of stress, fear, and anxiety over some really pretty scary things. And then in terms of podcasts, you can record a podcast using an application called QuickTime that probably comes already installed and for free on your laptop computer, your desktop computer. And then I have a resource here called Podbean, which will take that MP3 or MP4 file and export it to any podcast listing service like Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. Dr. Chan just pinged me here and mentioned StreamYard as a great streaming service that integrates with Facebook and allows you to invite guests onto the live stream. Do you want to talk more about that and maybe say a note about podcasts, Michael?
Yeah, sure. Let me just start with StreamYard since I had just mentioned that. StreamYard.com is like I said, it's a streaming service that integrates with Facebook. And so I've used it in the past when coronavirus just hit. I did these Corona happy hours where I would like drink Corona beer and then just talk about whatever was going on. And people wanted to come on and chat. And so StreamYard, it will stream live to Facebook. But if I wanted to invite people, I would drop a link into the comments and say, hey, if you want to come on and have a conversation, just click the link and it would automatically put them in a little queue. And I could press on their icon or their face and they would be integrated directly into the live stream. Facebook used to have this as a native feature. They no longer do. Why, I have no idea, but you could imagine that's an interesting way of having lay participation in a worship service, right? So if you still want to have, for instance, lay readers of the text, you could do that over Facebook Live using StreamYard and say, hey, now we're going to hear from Ryan Panzer, who's going to read from the book of Luke or something like that. So StreamYard is free. I think there is a paid option. All that you get with that is maybe a stream that doesn't have their branding on it, whatever. You can use your own branding. With regard to podcasting, I do it in a couple different formats, but I think on the congregational level, like Ryan said, this can be really useful just as an internal resource to get interesting stories out and to kind of communicate how God's at work in the community when we can't hear those stories around coffee, after the service or, during the Wednesday night Bible studies or something like that.
Thanks for sharing your perspectives. And if you haven't subscribed to the Gospel Beautiful podcast, it's an excellent resource. I recommend the interview with Andy Root, especially. Two of my favorite seminary professors on one podcast episode. Okay, so one last word for me, which is how do we pivot then from taking a congregation that attends and is engaged to a congregation that leads? We can do that just by taking the content, the process of creating digital content and making that process collaborative. So the way we do that is we think of a pastor as having three different roles within the realm of creating digital content. The first role is the role of creator. Any pastor or church leader should be thinking about how to author theologically sound digital content. And I say theologically sound because all of us have probably had experiences where we've seen or experienced some kind of digital content that maybe made us a little bit uneasy. You have a chance to be the voice of the church and to be represented in a digital landscape where the church is always represented, and sometimes not by the perspectives or the voices we'd like it to be represented by. So that's part of the reason why I encourage any church leader to be a creator and a consistent creator of digital content. But it's not just about creation, it's also about curation. How do you take what's already out there, the good blogs, the good podcasts, the good videos, and share those resources with your community? This helps your church community to be a discerning consumer of spiritual content on the web, of which there is much, but much of it isn't always of a highly consistent or theologically sound quality. But perhaps the most important role, the role that's going to transition your congregation from a community that's engaged to a community that leads, is the role of coach. And it's so important for pastors and church leaders to crowdsource the creation of original content, exploring faith stories of how God is at work within their context. Simply asking the question, what is God up to, and how are you involved? How am I involved? Putting those things into digital content. And just to say one more word on that, my congregation got together a few years ago. We created a podcast that we do every year at Lent and in Advent. And what we do through that podcast is we invite members of the congregation to record a 3 to 5 minute story around the theme that's being preached on for Advent or for Lent. One year the theme was liminal spaces. We had a story from an oncologist in our congregation talking about the liminal spaces that her cancer patients at the University of Wisconsin live in. We transitioned that into the pastor, the senior pastor, talking about liminal spaces in the context of the Advent season, and how Advent is this time of waiting where we're in this tension between the here and the not yet, and how God is always present in those liminal spaces. And then we closed with some scripture reading and some prayer. But I mentioned that example because it shows how easy it is to coach your community to get involved in the work of telling God's story through digital content. Whether you do that through blogs or podcasts or videos, the medium isn't as important as enlisting your congregation to tell those stories and to tell those stories alongside of you. It's when we do that we get a congregation that leads, a congregation that takes an ownership stake in the mission and the vision of the church. And to tie all of these things together, when we do all of this, we get a church that is naturally full of evangelism. When we put together a church community, a digital marketing strategy for a church community that combines awareness, websites and ads that get people thinking about what God is up to in our midst, social media and newsletters that get them to attend and to be present with the actions of and the work of the community, with engagement that highlights that story and clarifies our mission and vision and demonstrates how God is active. And through making that process collaborative so our community members have an ownership stake. All of these things then put together will naturally lead to word of mouth invitations and recommendations. People say it's sometimes difficult to get folks from their church to share their church's Facebook posts, to share their church's recorded sermons, to share their church's Facebook live services. And it's not all that surprising, because if the members of that church had an active stake in creating those things, how much more likely would they be willing to share? How much more likely would they be to spread that message? And that's how we create an evangelism through digital marketing, is through doing all of these things in sequence, putting together awareness, attendance, engagement, and leadership. So I hope this segment has given you at least an overview of this landscape. Maybe it's made this landscape a little bit complex, and if it has, I certainly apologize. But my hope is that it's shown you that as a church leader, you already have the skills to do these things exceedingly well. The next step is just to think about what tactics align to the skills that you already have as a church leader. Now, our next phase of the webinar here is we're going to turn things over to Dr. Chan, and he's going to connect this to kind of the theology of ministry, of why we do ministry, of what God calls us to, and explain to us why some of these tactics, which might seem at times tedious, at times difficult, are so important in the world that we're living in. So, Dr. Chan, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Let me get my screen share up. Okay. Almost there. Ryan, thanks for that. That was just a great presentation. And I want to say just that when it comes to these marketing things, be really patient with yourself. There is so much to learn here. And I think Ryan would agree, even though Ryan was professionally in this environment for a long time, I think he would agree that you never master this stuff. In fact, the people that do it best are the ones that know they are students all the time, and that you don't ever put it on cruise control. And so you have to be really patient with yourself, and try to think about social media marketing really on the timeline of years, as opposed to just like, how many clicks can I get in 7 days or something like that. I think there are ways of kind of accelerating your growth that I think are helpful. And in fact, there's a book recommendation I'm going to give you right now that I forgot to put on my slideshow. Give me just a second and I'll tell it to you. Oh yeah, so it is called 1 Million Followers: How I Built a Massive Social Following in 30 Days by Brendan Kane. It's an interesting book, and not all of it is going to be applicable in the church environment, but there is a lot to learn there. Brendan Kane has worked on marketing for some people that are quite famous, and so he has a lot of credibility, but the book itself I think has some good principles there. Again, it's called 1 Million Followers. You'll find it, it's on Audible as well for those of you who are like me and no longer have time to read books. No, I'm just kidding. I have to read books for my job, but on those commutes and long walks, it's nice to have something like that. Okay, so my presentation, as you can tell, is called Telling a Remarkable Story. I'm going to ask Ryan, if you don't mind keeping your eye on chat, and you just interrupt me, Ryan, if I need to address something. So the text here you see is from Luke 4, one of my favorite Gospels. Then Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all of the surrounding country. And in many ways, I want to talk about a couple different ideas. One is, of course, how we think about marketing in terms of what we're of faithfulness to the gospel, and in fact, the call of the gospel. And then I also want to talk about this notion of spreading. And you'll notice that in the title here, I highlighted the word remark in remarkable. I use the term remarkable for a really important reason that I think will become clear as I move along. Let me just say a couple brief words about my own background. I mentioned a bit of this earlier, but I own a business that I co-founded, I co-own it, called Heritage Media, and we do kind of architectural real estate, listing photography and videography. We do digital marketing design, administration of analysis, and then we do social media management. And so we work and have worked with a bunch of different clients, from car dealerships to real estate agents, mostly located in northern Arizona. We work with with a handful of hunting outfitters as well, some computer services people. And so we're in a couple of different industries, but my role in that is mainly on the consultation end, and I'm a co-owner. But through that experience, we've been able to learn a few things about social media. And for me, the real payoff is on the theology side, because that's what I'm ultimately passionate about, is helping church leaders gain a little bit more confidence in social media. There's so much to do here on the marketing side that my hope is just that you'll build a little bit of time in each day to gain just a tiny bit more competency in this area, so you can become that much more of an effective communicator, that much more of an effective marketer, and ultimately so that more people could, for the sake of more people being able to hear this incredible gift that we have in the death and resurrection of Christ, which is for every single one of us, right? So here's my kind of thesis today, the argument that I want to make to you. Christian congregational marketing seeks to tell a remarkable and authentic story about how Jesus is at work in your congregation, and to do so in a way that the story spreads. So there I'm back to the Luke text again, and there I'm back to the remarkable part. From my perspective, the goal of marketing should be to tell a story that is so interesting and compelling that people will actually share it. Within the marketing world, you would call this word of mouth, right? And so what's really helpful is to ask yourself the question, what makes people want to share something? Ryan actually drew attention to this at the very beginning of his conversation when he talked about how he's a super fan. And, you know, he has this, you know, the football guy in the back, and I'll never understand obsession with football, but whatever, that's his deal. But the truth is that Ryan probably, you don't have to twist Ryan's arm too hard to get talking about football, and and those are the kinds of stories that we want to seek to tell. The truth is that as people who are gathered around the cross of Christ, we already have the most remarkable story that humanity has ever heard. We already have it. It is the very thing that we gather around. Sometimes it's easy to forget because we're sort of we're around that story all the time as ministry leaders. We experience it all the time. It's part of our job to tell that story. You know, we're like in many ways, ministers and church leaders are professional storytellers. At least that's one important aspect of our role. And so sometimes because we're doing that all the time, the story becomes familiar and it loses a little bit of its gleam. It shouldn't, but it does. It's just the nature of how things are. But we already have the most remarkable story, the most remarkable gift that is available to humankind at work in our congregations. The question is, are we telling that story in a way that is authentic to who we are as a people, who our congregations are, and what the Spirit's calling to us, and in a way that people want to share that as well? So for me, that's sort of the goal. Now, another way of putting this is, are we telling the story of Jesus and his love for us and for the world, for creation, in a way that is contagious? And that's a word, of course, that is quite loaded in our current moment. But that language was used by Jonah Berger. He's at Columbia Business School, if I remember correctly. This is a great book that I recommend to you called Contagious: Why Things Catch On. And one of the things that Jonah Berger lifts up is the importance of word of mouth marketing, of word of mouth, kind of the word of mouth phenomenon in a social media environment. Now, it's easy to underestimate the value of word of mouth in the social media environment because we have so many other shiny things to look at. But from my perspective, the goal of social media marketing is to enable and activate word of mouth transmission of whatever the story is that you happen to be telling. For our case, it's the story of the gospel, or the story of how Jesus is at work in your local congregations. And so what Jonah can do through drawing on especially social science and marketing research is show what we can say, what is sort of the formula of contagiousness, of being a kind of contagion. And it's a very helpful book in that way. Some things that you'll take away from that, some things you'll just set to the side and say that probably isn't relevant to, you know, a ministry setting, but definitely worth reading nonetheless. Now, theologically, Christian marketing has its roots in the Christian practice of testimony. So Christians are by nature a storytelling people, or at least we should be. And marketing is about embracing this identity and executing on it faithfully and effectively. I think sometimes I'm within a Lutheran context. I know Ryan is as well. I'm not going to assume that that's true of everybody. But I think in many mainline contexts, the term testimony is not commonly used. It feels a little bit foreign. If you maybe come from an evangelical background or a Pentecostal or charismatic theological background, those words are a little bit more normal, or they feel like maybe a little bit more comfortable. And there, the practice of testimony is about people telling about how Jesus has changed their life, how Jesus has saved them. And that's really where we're grounding this, is in this storytelling thing of how has Jesus impacted our community, how has Jesus impacted our lives, and how can we tell that story to others so that they will want to share it, and that they will also have an interest in engaging with our community, that they will be able to tell that Jesus is in our midst through how we tell the story of God's love. Okay, here's something that's really important to note. Most marketing fails. Most marketing attempts will fail. And here's the way to think about it. What was the last product or service or advertisement that you just had to tell somebody about? Just think, let's sit with that for a second. And I would be interested in hearing in chat what that last thing was for you. And I'll tell you what it was for me in a second. What was the last product, service, advertisement you absolutely had to tell somebody about? Drop it in chat if you can remember. The Snuggie. Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay, there was a recent Nike commercial, Ben. Thanks for that. Church services during. Oh, that's interesting, Manuel. T-Mobile lady saying, RV rentals. That's interesting, Heather. So that's great. So for me, the last thing that I absolutely had to share with somebody was I saw a Dr. Squatch soap commercial, and they're really quirky and they're pretty funny. The commercial was 5 minutes long. And I watched it from beginning to end multiple times. That advertisement broke so many rules in terms of length. In so many ways, it violated kind of typical marketing practice. But at least in my case, and based on the views that I saw, millions and millions of people had viewed this, it worked on others as well. Think about those advertisements that were effective that you had to tell somebody about, and begin to ask yourself why. Why did that work on me at that particular moment? Were there triggers in the environment that suggested to me that I, watch that all the way through or share that with somebody? And as you begin to analyze your own thinking, you'll gain insight into how to then craft marketing materials that are similarly that similarly sort of get their hooks into people. And the reason I'm emphasizing the shareability piece is because in the current environment, the current marketing environment is in many ways predicated on trying to create authenticity, by which I mean that we're pretty cynical consumers of marketing material in the modern day. Like, it's no accident that if you go back to like the 90s or the early 2000s, you still have this kind of celebrity oriented marketing where you have somebody who, says, oh, I use this product, and I'm a famous person and this is a good enough reason for you to buy it. Like, we still have celebrity marketing, but it's very, very different. What creates authority oftentimes in marketing environments now is the sense that the person on the other end isn't gaining from being part of the advertisement. This is true to their life story. And that's why the word of mouth piece is so important, because we often trust the people who are around us. We trust word of mouth a little bit more than we trust others. And so Jonah Berger goes into a little bit of that, the research end of that, the psychological research, in his book Contagious. So anyways, let's move on here to my next slide. Give me a second. So here's a question to ask. Is the story of Jesus' work in your church a story that is being told in the community? Are you telling a remarkable story? So this is an analytical question. And another way to kind of turn the question slightly differently to say is, what story is being told about your local church community at the corner donut shop, right? What are people saying about your church in sort of local social media chat spaces on Facebook or whatnot. What is the story that is predominant about your congregation in the community? Now, maybe that story is not ideal. I think that would be the answer that many people might pose. They say, well, the story that people tell in my congregation, maybe it's positive, but maybe it's not remarkable. Right? It's fine. It's good to have a good reputation in your community. That's something to build on. From my perspective, it's not good enough. It's not good enough just to have a positive story told. We need to have a remarkable story told. And that's not because we need to be deceptive. It's because it is true. This is how Jesus is at work in our communities. That doesn't mean we're perfect communities. Far from it, right? Jesus, if you want to find Jesus, just look for the nearest sinner, right? So how are those remarkable stories of how the Spirit is at work being told outside, or are they being told at all? And that's part of what I think the role of church marketing is, internally to ask these questions. How is God remarkably at work here? And then secondly, is that story being told? And then thirdly, if it is not being told, what do I need to do to tell it in ways that are going to be remarkable and that will also be shared and passed on and be of interest? And as Ryan said earlier, told in a way that can be heard in the current idiom, that people can hear it and recognize that God is at work in your community in life-changing ways. Okay, here's another great book recommendation that I want to take a quote from. This is Seth Godin. Seth Godin has been one of the most important marketing voices on the kind of within the world of marketing, really since the 90s and maybe even before that. But I think he really came into prominence in the 90s. He does a daily email. It's very short. I think it's daily. I think that's right. And it's just like 1 or 2 paragraphs. Sign up for it. It's absolutely worth it. Seth has a ton of different books. He started a lot of different businesses, but this is one of the books that I appreciate. I'll cite another one in a minute. All Marketers Are Liars. The title is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the most important part is the subtitle, The Power of Telling Authentic Stories in a Low-Trust World. The low-trust part is really important. If you and I cannot tell stories about our church that will seem that are authentic in a world that is deeply cynical, in a market or an environment where people look upon marketing with inherent skepticism, so how do you generate trust in a 90-second video? How do you generate trust in a podcast? How do you generate trust in a Facebook ad? And from Godin's perspective, the way you generate trust is through authenticity. And this is very difficult, right? If you leave this time, my presentation with anything, it is that we have never had more marketing tools at our disposal. On the other hand, in many ways, we have never had a more difficult task than it is to create compelling marketing in ways that are authentic and that actually generate trust. Within the world of nonprofits and small business ownership and really just life in general, the hardest thing to gain is trust. It also happens to be the easiest thing to lose. Trust is the most valuable commodity, as it were, the most valuable thing that you can try and gain, but it's also really hard. Now, here's the quote that I want to draw attention to from Godin. Either you're going to tell stories that spread, or you are going to become irrelevant. Godin's very straightforward that way. I think he's right. So in some ways, what Godin is doing is he's raising the bar very high, and the bar should be high here. From my perspective, as I mentioned earlier, most marketing fails, right? Most of the marketing that you encounter today will fail to capture your attention. I would urge you sometime to wake up one morning and just keep a little piece of paper next to you and take a note of every piece of marketing that you encounter throughout the day. And then grade its effectiveness on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of its how effective was it in terms of getting you to buy the product or even just share it? I think you'll find that it's probably like well under 5% of the marketing attempts that you encounter will actually push you to a place, or will, attract you to go and buy the product, share it, even take a second glance at it. Click on the link. Most of it will fail. So Godin here sets a very high standard. Either you're going to tell stories that spread, or you're going to become irrelevant. Read that book. It's great. It's easily consumable from an audio perspective. Seth writes that way. He's very clear in his writing. Now, here's another Seth Godinism. Is your church a purple cow? That would be a Seth Godin question. He famously wrote a book called Purple Cow, Transform Your Business by Being Remarkable. Here's the thesis of the book. I live in cow country. I live around a lot of cows. I drive by them every single day. And never do I stop to look at any of those cows or to wonder about what's going on in their day or whatever. If I were driving down the road and I saw a purple cow, I assure you I would stop, I would photograph it, and I would make some kind of Facebook post about it. Guaranteed, right? Because a purple cow is so weird, so strange, so remarkable that I would be compelled to share it. Is your church a purple cow? Is the story that you are telling about your church and that's being told, is it a purple cow? Does it compel people to turn their heads and say, that's interesting, or that's remarkable, or that makes me think, or I need to tell somebody about it? Again, one of the advantages we have as Christians is that we don't have to think up a new product. We don't have to think up a new service. We don't have to think up a new idea to sell or a new process to sell. The gift is already there. The gift is already yours. Are we telling the story? The purple cow of purple cows, right, is already the church already has this, within its tradition, within its traditional sources. Is the story being told? Let me offer a few additional theological reflections here, and as we kind of slide into home. The Spirit of God is already at work in your congregation in life-changing, liberating, and remarkable ways. You don't need to go in search of the remarkable. It's literally right there in front of you. Maybe you're not paying as much attention to it. Maybe you do need to scratch a little bit beneath the surface. Ask a couple of questions. It's already there. I was in an interim pastor position back in northern Arizona at Grace Lutheran Church, and I had about 6 months with that congregation. And the first thing that we did in our first month and a half together, we did a sermon series on how Jesus was at work in our midst. And so what I asked the congregation to do was to submit stories of how they had experienced God's presence at our church. And then those stories became kind of central artifacts within a preaching series. But what it also did was it gave me material for kind of helping them to discern how the Spirit was at work and how they might be called to their larger community. What is God doing here? That's a question that Ryan brought up at numerous points in his presentation. And so sometimes an initial step to marketing isn't actually to go get all the accounts. Maybe your first, on Instagram and Facebook or whatever, maybe your first step in marketing is to say, I need to listen for a little bit of time and try and discern what the remarkable work of the Spirit is in my congregational context. So that's the first point. The second one, but the question is whether we recognize, the Spirit's work and are effective at telling that story in a way that it can be heard as good news in the broader community. And I think earlier, somebody had asked about sort of the language that we use, like church language or not church language. To be honest, I think this depends a little bit on what you're, who you're trying to target. Like maybe you are trying to target people who are familiar with that kind of language, and that's fine. Then, use language that might be a little bit more insider type talk. But if you are through your marketing trying to maybe reach out to people who have had a bad experience with the church, or who have never, had much of an experience with the church, then you're going to want to kind of sort of modulate your language differently. You might not want to use words like justification or sanctification or something like that. Not that those are unimportant words, but there might be the wrong window dressing, is what I mean to say. Justification right now, given the remarkable levels of judgmentalism that exist within our society today, justification may be one of the most important doctrines for us to be studying right now. Because of the way in which the gospel frees us before the law. So I'm not saying that we should dump all this traditional theological language, not at all. I just want us to talk about it in a way that it can be heard for the life-giving power that it has. So let me offer just a couple practices for discerning a remarkable story. So I mentioned just a minute ago that maybe your first step isn't to go sign up for all the accounts. Maybe your first small baby step into the world of effective marketing for your church is actually to discern, what is this remarkable story that can be told in my community more broadly? And I just want to make 4 points here. One has to do with mindset. The second, reflective questions. Thirdly, what is the story? Can I tell it in one sentence? And then fourthly, how can I use all the digital tools I learned about today to tell that story? So I'll just lay these out slide by slide. I'll call these the marketing fruits of the Spirit. Empathy, gratitude, humility, and curiosity. I think empathy may be one of the most important ones. You might think, gosh, that's strange to put empathy in a marketing presentation. I actually think it may be one of the most important tools of great marketers. I got this idea from a guy who I'm going to recommend to you at the end. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk, is sort of a current guru within the world of marketing. He thinks he's the one who put me onto this notion that empathy is one of the most important things that marketers need to have. And it's not the kind of empathy that says, I want to sort of like learn how to manipulate the mind of people. That would not be true empathy. He's talking about the kind of empathy that genuinely says, what can I offer that is of supremely high value to the person or the community that I am marketing to? And for him, that looks like giving away a lot of free stuff, or not free stuff, giving away a lot of free information, not out of a place of trying to manipulate people, but out of a genuine spirit of generosity. What can I do today that will powerfully impact the people that I love, the people that I am empathetic toward? What can I do today that is going to make their world a slightly better place? And that empathetic response also happens to be amazing for brand. It also happens to be amazing for generating trust. Okay, so empathy is the first thing. Secondly is gratitude. Marketing is also a lot about creativity. How do I creatively tell this story in a way so that it can be heard? Gratitude and creativity go hand in hand. And gratitude also allows you to see more clearly the gifts that your community has. And so an attitude of gratitude, an attitude of, God, you have given me you have given this community an incredible gift. If you see your community as gift, you will be much more effective in the marketing space, because you won't have to, go slogging through the mud to try and find what's remarkable about your place. It's going to be on your very lips. So gratitude is another sort of marketing fruit of the Spirit. Thirdly, humility. Marketing, especially in the digital age, is all about learning. I mentioned earlier how important it is to kind of study the data that's coming in, and be willing to just try, learn, experiment, fail. That's an important part. Like if you have a marketing person on staff, most churches don't, I would imagine. It's important that you tell that person, hey, look, marketing is about learning. And if we need to do some experiments and like 75% of those experiments fail, but we learn in the process the 25% that actually work, that actually get people to share, that actually get people interested in our community, let's go for it. But if you as a church leader don't create an environment of humility in which people can learn from those kinds of mistakes, that is a mistake of leadership. And so part of marketing is creating that environment of learning and humility, and just recognizing that most marketing will fail, and that's true for everybody. Like even those who are really effective in this space. Last is curiosity. An important thing to do is just to be curious about like what's happening right now on the social media world. Spend some time, maybe just dedicate, don't fall too much into this black hole, but dedicate a certain amount of your time to just wandering social media, wandering TikTok, wandering YouTube, wandering Facebook, wandering Instagram, and especially looking for things that are trending, wandering to Twitter. What's trending? What do people seem to be responding to? And some of those things are going to be profoundly negative, right? The truth is, and Jonah Berger talks about this, that for some reason, human beings, conflict grabs their attention, right? Controversy grabs human attention. There are ways of like doing this with the dark side that I think is not helpful for us, right? There are probably ways of doing, of recognizing that and deploying in a way that I think is ethical, and in a way that might also ultimately liberating and helpful. And so, spend some time allowing just your curiosity to wander. What's happening in these spaces? Curiosity is, from my perspective, an important kind of virtue or fruit of the Spirit for marketers. So I'm not going to go through all of these questions, but you're going to receive this PowerPoint anyway. These are some reflective questions that you can use in your community to kind of get a sense of how God might be at work. In many ways, these are just kind of missional type, standard missional questions. Just to say one thing about the first one, what God sightings have there been in your church? Where and how do people experience the presence of Jesus? These questions will help you begin to scratch the surface on how you think God might be at work. And most of you are probably already able to answer these questions on your own. I urge you to pose questions like this to lay members, especially because, of course, members of your congregation are going to experience church very differently than you do. And so, I could imagine having, inviting, when we can do this face to face, hosting a church dinner where you say, hey, look, we're just trying to learn a little bit more about how God's at work here. The church is going to host a dinner, and in small groups, we're going to go through some of these questions together. And we're going to record them on sticky notes or maybe on butcher paper or whatever, create some kind of recording mechanism. And we're just going to talk about some of these questions. And in groups, we're going to go through these. And you as the pastor, then perhaps with the council as well, or other whatever kind of leadership collaborative groups you might have, say, let's discern a little bit around these responses that we're getting. You will learn something that you didn't expect. And so that's just a set of questions to go through. And then finally, just some recommended resources here. Some book and media recommendations. One, Jonah Berger, I already talked about Jonah's book, Contagious. Secondly, John Doerr's Measure What Matters, How Google, Bono, and the Gates Foundation Rock the World with OKRs. Amy Edmondson, The Fearless Organization. This is a really, really important book, I think, especially for those of you who have supervisory roles. That's an important one, and especially around the kind of the issue of humility that I mentioned earlier. Fourthly, Purple Cow, Seth Godin's Purple Cow, and then All Marketers Are Liars. Both of these are great. John Ruhlin's Giftology, The Art and Science of Using Gifts to Cut Through the Noise. This is mainly a sales book, to be perfectly honest, but there are some really important lessons there around how important gift giving is. And things as simple as writing notes, and how that can help to generate trust within a community, how it can increase things like empathy and sort of lubricate the social gears, that kind of stuff. And then finally, some resources from Gary Vaynerchuk. His book, Crushing It, is really good. And then Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast, The Gary V Audio Experience, is, I think, really invaluable. He's very rough around the edges, just kind of keep that in mind, but is, from my perspective, one of the most important and inspiring He's a kind of kick you in the pants sort of person. So just sort of be prepared for that, but I think very insightful. So Ryan, are there any other kind of resources you would add to the list here that we might want to draw people's attention to?
Well, while we're talking about book recommendations, the book that really connects these to the tactics of digital marketing is called Click to Save Reboot by Keith Anderson and Elizabeth Drescher. And then another book that I recommend that isn't necessarily about like ministry, but is certainly about like storytelling and culture, is the book Choosing Our Religion by Elizabeth Drescher. I'm going to Google that really quickly to make sure. Choosing Our Religion, The Spiritual Lives of America's Nones, Nones, by Elizabeth Drescher. That book just hits many of the key points about what is the spiritual life like of those who are on the periphery of your church, of your ministry, and how can you tell a story that resonates with them. Michael, Kayla asked, what was the fourth point in the practices of discerning a remarkable story?
That's a good question. I will copy and paste it here just a second. Okay.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to pull up some concluding slides for our time together, and we'll close with some time for Q&A, either about the contents of this afternoon's webinar or about any projects that you might be working on related to digital marketing or ministry in a digital age. We'll be here to chat till 3:30. Certainly after the webinar ends, you're welcome to jump off at any point, but we'll hang out to answer any questions there might be. So first of all, there's a lot to learn. This can be at times an exciting topic, a promising topic, and an overwhelming topic. The key is to explore these things in community and to make sure you're having conversations about telling this story with other church leaders. So to that end, Dr. Chan and I are offering to continue the conversation with you on a one-to-one basis. And what we're offering specifically is to look at some of the tools we looked at through today's webinar about how you build a marketing path, and to make sure that the marketing path that you build aligns to the mission and vision and skills within your ministry context. The second thing we want to do with those conversations is to see that you have the resources to implement the right tactics along that marketing path. What are the tactics that matter most for your context, for awareness, for attendance, for engagement, leadership, and evangelism? And the format that we're looking to do that in are complimentary initial 60-minute coaching sessions with the two of us. And you can sign up for those in one of two ways. First of all, feel free to send either one of us an email, and we'll be glad to get that scheduled. They're held via Zoom, just like today's webinar. You can also sign up for these as part of our course survey. And so I guess it wouldn't be a course run by a seminarian and a seminary professor if we didn't have a survey at the end. I'll post this link in the Zoom chat. It's also here on this slide. It's just a few questions to get your feedback on this experience, so we can make sure that future webinars are as effective as possible. We do hope to keep offering these, maybe to add some topics that go into a little bit more depth onto some of the things that were covered in today's course. Dr. Shane, anything you want to add to that?
Will you just copy and paste that bit.ly link, Ryan, into chat?
Yeah, I will do that right now.
And you all will get, of course, the presentation too. But yeah, I just want to say that this can all feel very, very overwhelming, and we totally get that. Even small steps, I'd say. Just pick one thing that you think might work for your community and begin to walk in that direction and begin to learn. So maybe it's that you need to create a Facebook page for your church. Maybe it's that you want to learn how to write copy, write text, or develop images that will grab people's attention. and try that out on Facebook, try that out on Instagram. Maybe it's that you want Instagram, or you want something like Facebook to be a place where your community connects together a little bit more than it does right now. Just choose one or two small goals and begin to move in that direction, and you will learn as you move. Okay, so it looks like we've already got a question here, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah, and just one more thing just one more item before we go into the Q&A. I did write this little book, and I say little because I meant for this book to be approachable and accessible to the busy church leader. A couple years ago, I started doing some research into this intersection of Christian ministry and technology to kind of combine the two passions that I had for both worlds. And so this book attempts to help church leaders integrate ministries with the values of the digital age, with this tech-shaped culture that we all share. One thing I want to highlight with the book is that it has a series of specific tools, discussion questions, and step-by-step tactics for you to implement some of the approaches that were brought up in this webinar. And so that book doesn't come out till December 1st. It is available for pre-order. And if you order off of Fortress Press, you can use that promo code to get 30% off. You can even copy that, tuck it away, and as we get closer to December, you can order it and you'll still get 30% off. All right. Yeah, I know we had some questions. Let's turn it over to Q&A and have some discussion. Okay, so one of the questions that I'm seeing here is from Patrick, and Patrick is asking, would you discuss Facebook premieres? Perhaps Heather could join in. Yeah, this was one of the topics that was mentioned earlier in the call. I don't know, Heather, are you still with us? Do you want to maybe unmute yourself and share a little bit about what you're working on as far as Facebook premieres?
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm getting ready to do my internship here in Milwaukee, so not too far from you. And one of the things that I'll be working on is trying to find ways to, I think, expand awareness about this congregation. They got a lot of really cool things going for them. And the other thing is she was looking into using things like the Sling Studio Hub and things like that. So I think we'll get to do some online technological experiments. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking through ways that we can record and or go live and make it more interactive for everyone. So it's not just that constant data dump kind of thing.
Yeah, Heather, that's thanks for sharing your insight on this topic. And so if you're less familiar with some of these topics, it's helpful to think of anything your church puts online in terms of video on a continuum of recorded experiences, like a pre-recorded worship, or live streamed experiences, which might be a worship service, it might be a sermon, it might be like a pastoral reflection or prayer. And both of those formats work on social media. I think what church leaders are finding is that with some of the live stream worship, especially, there's not as strong of a sense of community as they would like there to be. So that question, which I think came from I forget who posted it originally, was about Facebook watch parties. Recording a worship service, setting it on Facebook to premiere at a certain time, say 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, and then everyone in the congregation can gather together on Facebook at their own homes, on their own devices, and watch together, which allows you to comment on the videos as you're all watching them. I've used that format with a nonprofit board that I serve on for some continuing ed events, and it worked really nicely. We used it for a webinar format a couple of years ago. So it's been around. It's technology that's well documented. The one thing I would encourage you to do is, if you're going to use recordings and premieres and watch parties, is to be intentional about when you invite people to engage. If you want people to, respond with comments, to type them into a chat box, or to comment on the video, make sure it's pretty clear when and where and how you want them to comment, and don't necessarily leave it open-ended. I find, especially with the experience of church online, people will engage when they've been given the invitation to engage. Otherwise, they might sit back a little passively. If you're like me, you might go change a diaper or clean a few dishes in the process, because that's the life of having little kids in the house. But give them very clear and direct invitations to participate.
Yeah, that's helpful. I do think that Facebook Premieres has opened up a lot of opportunities on the community, and to just consider, if you're doing a synchronous live stream, you are focused on doing your job, which is performative, right? You're performing the service. But if you pre-record it, then it allows you to interact with people in the comments, and even think about, you can think creatively about passing the peace, or you can think creatively about prayers for the congregation, where you would invite people to, hey, let's post in the comments the names of people we want prayer for, or even using the Zoom breakout rooms as prayer rooms. So if you want to invite people, hey, do you need prayer? We're going to have a breakout room open. Just put an X into chat so that we know to invite you into a breakout room. But if you are live streaming this, you don't have time to do that. So what's interesting is that your congregation members, if you're at a somewhat larger or mid-sized congregation, may have more easy access to you as the pastor through a digital format than they might on a Sunday morning, when they don't want to wait, when you're having to compete with the cookie line or talk to the pastor. I'm going for the cookie line personally.
I'll say I really miss the cookie line.
We've got two questions here. One from Taryn, I think, Ryan. Curious to hear a brainstorm. How might a congregation blend digital and in-person presence when sanctuary spaces are open? This is a good question. Easier to bring in-person online, but how might congregations bring online into the sanctuary? Maybe a crazy thought. Anticipating empty feeling sanctuaries. That's a great question. Any thoughts there, Ryan?
Yeah, so my first thought, and Taryn, I think you're wearing a Los Angeles Lakers sweatshirt. So if anyone has watched the NBA, they're playing these games in Orlando, Florida, in what's being called the bubble, and they've got these virtual fans that are on these screens that are watching the basketball game. And all these virtual fans are sitting in front of their laptop with webcams on, and the technology is beaming them into the arena, so it looks like they're sitting courtside, and it's quite an interesting effect. But like the NBA is almost leading the way for thinking about how to bring people back to church, because when we bring people back to our sanctuaries, it's not going to be all at once. There's not going to be a single day where 100% of people feel comfortable going back to the sanctuary. So there's always going to be like some who for maybe a very long time would prefer to be online for their own safety and health. I think as church leaders, it's important to get ahead of this question of how do we create a seamless experience between the online and the offline worship attendee. There are ways you can do that. On the easier end of the spectrum, you have using inclusive language with worship leadership, greeting those who are watching online, praying for those who are worshiping online. Inclusive language goes a long way. To get a little bit more sophisticated technologically, having a screen in the sanctuary and having your lectors read the lessons from home, having somebody speak the prayers of the people from their iPhone, from wherever they find themselves. Opening up some of those worship leadership roles that we typically associate with somebody doing in person on a Sunday to those in virtual contexts. And on the high-tech end of the spectrum, there are ways to do what the NBA is doing. For example, if you use Zoom, you could get a big screen TV or projector in your sanctuary and project the faces of those who are joining via Zoom on one of the walls of the sanctuary. So folks who are sitting in the pews can kind of see, I've heard it referred to as the cloud of witnesses visualization, can see those who are sitting next to them virtually.
Yeah, and the great irony here, Ryan, is that if you're like a single projector setup, which is I think a lot of people, then all of us who have been working hard to like get the bulletin digital will now probably have to revert to having physical bulletins so that we can stream in the digital audience in these kind of hybrid settings. So, this is the crazy world that we live in.
Does anyone else have thoughts on building that bridge between online and offline worship? And anyone want to unmute themselves and say a few words? Or Taryn, do you want to say a few more words on that?
Yeah, thanks. I've been thinking exactly what you said, Brian, about when people are going to be hesitant to come back into in person. And yet there might be 500 people there, but only 100 are in person. How does it feel not so empty? So yeah, I like the cutouts of thinking about doing a Zoom cloud of witnesses. That can be a great little bulletin something. So yeah, thanks.
You could always do what the Milwaukee Brewers are doing as well, and put cardboard cutouts of people in the pews.
That might help with spacing too.
Right.
Can't sit there. There's a cutout.
Other questions or topics for discussion that anyone wants to throw out there? All right, well, we will send a follow-up email out that'll have the recording to today's webinar, as well as a PDF of the slides that were projected today. Feel free to distribute those, forward those to whomever you like. Certainly, this is a topic that Michael and I are very excited about, very passionate about. We may very well do more of these in the future, maybe deep dives into like specific topics that were only addressed briefly today. So pay attention to email, and we may send more information about that in the future. Thank you all so much for taking the time. Remember to give yourself a little bit of space to disconnect now that you've been on a Zoom for 2.5 hours, and remember to breathe. Blessings as you go forth to do ministry in this highly uncertain time that we're all living in, where digital is our primary way of communicating. I really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Good to see you all.